I am very happy to be here. I am a strategist, I'm a CNN political commentator, and a fan of this movie, and a fan of Russell Hornsby, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm so happy to be here moderating this conversation. Thank you all for coming to join us today here in LA, but also thank you to our friends who are watching right now on the live stream in Brooklyn and in Charlottesville. So for our LA peeps, can give a shout out to the Brooklyn and Charlottesville people. Brooklyn, okay. I'm on my way to New York tomorrow. So we're gonna have a little chit chat, and we're gonna take questions from the audience here in LA and via our live stream, actually via Twitter, from folks in Charlottesville and Brooklyn. So make sure you guys use the hashtag the hate you give to submit your questions. And so start thinking about your questions, folks here in the audience, folks in Charlottesville and in Brooklyn. And we are taking questions, not soliloquies. Questions, not soliloquies. Questions, not soliloquies. All right, thank you. Okay, so let's just jump right in, Russell. One, you were amazing in this movie. I watched it again on the plane the other day when I was on my way to LA, and I was telling you upstairs, I kept having to hit pause because it was just gut-wrenching. It was just very gut-wrenching. At some points I was crying. At some points I was like, oh shit. Like the man next to me was like, what is going on? What is this girl watching? But this movie, it's really gut-wrenching. And talk to me about the emotional toll, really, that this role took on you.
You know, I mean, the reality of it is that it's an emotional toll because I'm a black man in America.
Come on.
Hello.
And so, you have to bring your whole self to the role. So I'm originally from Oakland and California, and just lived all over. And Maverick Carter is a representation of the brothers that helped raise me. You're talking about your coaches, you're talking about your uncles, teachers, all of those things, and just quite honestly, brothers, as I like to say, from the rhythm section, who just had a different way of how they maneuvered. Some who had been incarcerated, some who did some little dirt, all of that. I grew up, and was just surrounded by, all of that different kind of energy. And when I was young, it never felt like necessarily wrong per se. You know what I mean? But then as you get older, you're learning more about what it is to be black, what it is to be black in America, how you're treated, how we're mistreated. And then that starts to take a toll on you. You start reading more, you start gaining a different level of consciousness. And then you have a different interaction with your society and with community in different cities and places that you go. And so the reality of it is that this takes a toll, on you. And so, I always like to say that roles meet you where you are. And, this role came to me at the right time in my life. Married, just had recently had a second child, had 2 children, and still very young. So now, here I am, married, father of 2, and 2 boys, no less. So now I'm realizing what this really means, and the presence of Maverick and the presence of men in the lives of our children, and the presence of men and presence of black men in our communities, And so, when each day, working on it, our heart was heavy, to say the least, And I'm sure you got other questions, but it was just like, you carry it with you. You just can't help but do that. So it becomes like a release valve of sorts, Well,
I mean, you carry it because it's so real.
Absolutely.
Like, every single aspect of this is real, from the conversations that Star is having in her head as she's going to school talking about being Star 2.0, from the scene about the talk.
Yes.
The scene where Maverick sits, y'all gotta explain to you. Sits down, sits his kids down, and he's having to talk at the table with very young children. I've gotten to talk. I think there are many people in this room that have gotten to talk. Have you ever gotten to talk? Do you remember when you got to talk?
Well, the talk was different. I mean, I definitely got it, but it wasn't a sit-down moment. It was more of just like moments over time when my mother would just remind me and say, "You're a black boy," and they said they take black boys, they kill black boys, and they send them to jail. So, you know, when I got caught stealing from a store, she said, you know, they'll send your black ass to jail. You do that. You know what I mean? They might end up shooting your black ass if you do that again. It was those kind of things. Like, that became sort of the talk. So it was like every little instance that you messed up, you did something wrong, my mother would just like kind of co-sign it with, don't be one of them. You know what I mean? And so it wasn't a sit-down moment. It was just all these little lessons that happened over time.
I'm still getting taught. Okay, let me say some inflammatory thing. Okay, it's still necessary. Talk to me about the importance of portraying the talk on television, on film. Like, I think that scene was just really, really important.
Well, you know, first of all, the talk itself is important, unfortunately. And it was important 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's important today, and unfortunately, it may be important tomorrow. I think the reality of it is that what I feel is beautiful and just poetic about it is that you're seeing this man, this father, and who is with his wife and his 3 children all sitting around the table. And if you notice, you know, and George was really clear about this and very conscious of it, he wanted to show this family in this life. So he starts outside, you know, on the street. Everybody's out there playing, having a good time, double dutching, playing, riding their bikes, all that kind of stuff like that. And then we pan in on a single shot, and we're seeing this family sitting at a table as a family. And what that means, while everybody's out there playing, we're here handling business. And so it's very conscious of to have the father and the parents sitting at the table saying, we are here to discuss and talk about something that's very serious. And it's about that time now. And so before we can play, we got to handle business. And so I think it's deeply profound, again, that we have this black nuclear family of sorts, you know, sitting at the table, and again, this father at the helm with all of his transgressions right behind him. And he can still be a man who's been to prison, been to jail. You know, you look at him, you can tell, man, this brother got something with him.
A little rough.
You know what I mean? Like, he got something with him.
Out on the edges.
But he's still so present and ready to, like, cares enough about his family to sit with them lovingly, right, with some care and compassion to say to his children, let's be mindful of what's out there. Let's be mindful of the landmines and what's out there because I do love you. And it just takes it back to, I think, of a bygone era, to be honest with you, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, I think another great aspect of that particular scene is not only is Maverick telling his children what to do, what you should do if you're caught in that situation, but what struck me was when he said, and they might pull me over, I probably didn't do anything. Right. It doesn't mean I did something. Right. The idea that you have to explain that to your children so that they understand that there are things that will happen to you in this world that you will get caught up in many respects, in many aspects, and it's not because you specifically did anything.
Well, the perception is that we're guilty until proven innocent, you know what I mean? And so that's what he's essentially letting his children know, that, you know, they'll be stopping me. I probably didn't do anything wrong, but we still have to go through this process. We still have to take these steps. We still have to be very cautious and very mindful. As he says, moving makes them nervous. So just keep all of these things in mind and just let's be aware as a family, because he's saying it doesn't matter whether or not you did anything, whether right or wrong, we still have to act accordingly. And of course, that's foreshadowed because we see how that goes down later on.
Absolutely. I think there's some themes throughout the film, and I think one of the themes is this idea of what some people might call allyship. I'm gonna tell y'all right now, I don't want any more allies. I want some more accomplices. Because accomplices go down there with you. Allies is over there talking about, well, I was standing in solidarity. But allies had an alibi sometimes.
Right, you want some John Brown.
I want some John Browns, okay? I want an accomplice. And so I really think that we see the dichotomy of allyship versus folks who want to be accomplices in this movie. With KJ's character, Chris, I think he's struggling with how to be a good accomplice to Star. How can he support her? But then you also see Star's friend at school who, wants to walk out for the Black Lives Matter rally. But then she's like, well, maybe he had a gun. So she was more of an ally role. How can folks who want to be good accomplices, who maybe see this film, are engaging in conversations in their community, how can folks who want to be better accomplices, or even just want to try to be an accomplice in the first place, how can folks go about doing that?
Well,
how can we start this conversation?
Yeah, well, I think, Chris raises the best question you can. He says, I want to help. How can I help? Right? So it starts with that. I think, so we have to start with asking, how can I help? What do I need to know? Then I think it's very important that we're open to the lesson. We're open to hearing whatever person who you're engaging in conversation with has to say. And I think we have to listen, but I also think we have to allow ourselves, each other, the freedom and to know that let there be an impasse, right? There may be some ignorant things said, but it's all for the purpose of a better understanding, right? And so when we do that, people are going to ask ignorant questions, they're going to make ignorant statements, and we have to, they say, woosah.
Woosah. Right? We got it. Don't be ready to jump. Some people are so ready to jump.
And let that pass, and then let's engage in some real conversation. Let's ask questions of one another. I think that's how we start. But I think we just have to learn to listen. The saying goes, my teacher used to say this, it's a black thing, right? But let me help you understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Some people are going to say, I want you to know. People are going to use, now when y'all use it, you need to quote Russell.
But it used to be when we had those shirts, it's a black thing you wouldn't understand, right? And so it's just let me help you understand, because when we do that, when we say it wouldn't, you wouldn't, you're pushing people away. But when you're saying let me help you understand, we're bringing them in. And know, again, but let's also keep in mind that, Dick Gregory says, revolution is quick change, evolution is change over time. And we have to know that although we want revolution, we want the quick change, we want it tomorrow, we have to realize that this engagement, this dialogue that we're beginning to have, that we're starting to have, these questions of people saying, how can I help? This is all part of an evolutionary process. You know what I mean? And we have to be open to that. We have to understand that all that takes time, but we do have to take it one step at a time.
So we have to construct, if you will. We have to be intentional about constructing safe spaces to have a comfortable conversation.
That safe space situation, absolutely.
Safe space situation.
Yes.
I mean, people are laughing because this film evokes uncomfortable conversation.
Absolutely.
And frankly, I think we are in a place and time where folks do not know how to have many people do not know how to have constructive, uncomfortable conversations that are about getting to a place of understanding. Mm-hmm. We are in debate culture. I mean, that's what I do on television every day. Okay, I'm the pot, talk to the kettle.
You do it well.
Well, I try. But I think people are marrying, and I think it plays out in the film. They're marrying what they see on cable news, and then they're taking that and they're taking it online, and then they take what they're doing online into their various communities, into the classroom. Maybe not on this campus, other campuses, not here in UCLA, not in Charlottesville, not in Brooklyn. But they're taking that, and we are not engaging in actual dialogue to get to a place of understanding.
Well, I mean, I think the first step, right, is everyone's presence here. The thing is, I've been saying that, now this isn't me, but what we look to do is give everybody an opportunity to feel again. I think that as a culture, we've been desensitized by all the violence we see, all the violence we hear, right? And so the Tin Man says, what would I do if I could suddenly, from the Wiz, what could I do if I could suddenly feel? If I could reach inside of me and say, I like what I see, then there'll be more than glad to share all that I have inside me here. And if a tear should come to my eyes, think of all the wounds they would mend. Just to think the time we could spend being vulnerable again. See, when we as they say, I heard Danny Glover say this a long time ago. She wrote a little note to my mother. And when he signed it, he said, when we open our hearts, we open our minds. So when we come in, and the first step is coming here and being present in this theater tonight, right? And taking a moment to feel again. And that's going to expand everything else once we open this heart up, once we open our spirit, once we're touched, right? That begins the opening of our minds to think differently, right? To consider different ideas and different thoughts, right? And different kinds of conversation. That's when it starts happening. And we have to, as a culture, as a society, I believe that we have to get back to feeling again. You know what I mean?
Y'all can clap. I was gonna say. We started a conversation tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Another conversation that I think was started in the film that I want to talk about, and it was an idea that makes me uncomfortable. Actually, this code switching thing. You let me tell you, it makes me uncomfortable because you said something in the beginning. You talked about how you have to bring your whole authentic self into work, into what you do. And I think most people are like, okay, well, you're an actor, of course, but I'm somebody that believes that we should be bringing our whole authentic selves into every space and place where we are, regardless of what we do. Specifically because so many people fought so that I can be my authentic self. But so many folks still engage in code switching. Or ladies, the workforce, the thing you put on to make yourself seem a little more palatable in the office. Okay?
Right.
So, but why? So, one, I used to engage in code switching. One could argue sometimes I slip back into it every now and then. I'm like, somebody got to remind me. Okay, pull it out, get back. So one, is that something you've ever had to deal with? But two, why is it tough for so many people to bring their authentic selves into every space and place?
Well, I'll answer the last question first. I think it's difficult and a challenge for people to bring their authentic selves to work because they don't know who they are. Quite honestly, and listen, that's not. I'm not here to denigrate or cast aspersion or anybody, or say anybody's less than. I think that's just reality. I think it takes us all a little bit of time, a little bit of living, to figure out who we are, what we want out of life, what we want from the people that we engage with, and all that. So we're trying to find ourselves. And let me tell you something. It goes from being 12 years old to being 50 to 60 years old before you really have a great understanding of who you are and who the person is that's taking on this body, right? And so, but once you do find out who you are, I think that code switching is a natural occurrence. And on a certain level, I think it's necessary, right? But to say that, even though it is necessary, I think we have to really understand when we're doing it and why we're doing it. And how much are we sacrificing ourselves in the truth of who we are, right? Listen, when we walk in, we know, we go into a place, hey, I'm allowed, but well, you just switched up, right? Because you don't want to be rude or anything like that. So this is constantly things that we do. When we get into the workspace, now, we're trying to find out who we are to make sure that, who we are is palatable to our bosses, to our colleagues, or whatnot. But what starts to happen as we get older? People go, you know what? I'm tired of parting my hair. I'm tired of relaxing it.
Tired of having it.
Whatever. So I'm gonna let it go. And that's slowly people unwinding and finding who they are authentically, right? And then people gotta take however that comes, right? And then people, what do they start to do? They start to ask dumb questions. What kind of hair you got? Can I touch it? Is it really like wool? And you know what I mean? And what do you do? You had it was so straight before. How do you get it like that? How does it get natural like this? What happens if you put some water on it? Will it shrink? Will it grow? You know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. Can I touch it? No. But I guess what I'm saying is that but the thing is, it's when we diminish ourselves, when we coach, that becomes the issue. When we diminish who we are in our spirit, who we are in our soul, who we are, the person that our parents raised. When we take aspects of our rhythm, of our culture, the dynamics, like we can still come in all these places and spaces and still be us, still be yourself. It just takes a little time, and it's a part of finding who you are. And I think I believe, this is my feeling, once you do that, then these things start to become acceptable because you're not hiding from who you are. You know what I mean? That's what I feel. But there's other dynamics that get, but that's how I see it right now today.
I think it's an accurate view. And I mean, look, in the film, Star goes through this evolution of finding her voice, and in finding her voice, she finds out who she is. Which is why at the end of the film, you hear her say, "No more Star 2.0. You're just about to get Star." And I think that's something we can all take is that some days I struggle to find my voice. And I think that's something that many people can identify with.
Well, because we're doing that to make others feel comfortable.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then you have to ask yourself why.
Why am I trying to make you feel comfortable when I don't feel comfortable?
I'm very uncomfortable.
We can all coexist. You know what I mean? We can find some middle ground.
Okay.
We got to do that.
We got to find some middle ground. I got to be uncomfortable and Joe is just real comfortable.
There you go.
Okay, I have one more question, maybe two more, and then we're going to take some crowd questions. And get your questions ready, and we're taking questions, not
soliloquies.
Questions, not soliloquies. I teach a class on Mondays. Speak back to me. Okay. We saw a lot of really amazing, great breakthrough with diverse casts in very major studio films this year, last year, and I think in some of the years to come, hopefully. Yes. So I want to know, what does this mean for the future of film? And then also, how can we ensure that this becomes the norm? And not just diverse, but inclusive.
Right.
So what does this mean for the future first? What do you think?
Well, I think the future looks bright. If we look back on the last few years, 5 to 6 years, everything has gotten progressively better. We're seeing more people of color, more diversity, more just a variety of stories being told, right? And so I believe people feel like they're seeing themselves on the screen. They're seeing themselves portrayed, but what's more importantly is that they're seeing themselves portrayed authentically. And I think that's what's most important. I think we have to also look out for not just quantity, but quality, right? So again, how are we being portrayed? Now, in order for us to see more, the reality of it is that it's the movie business. And it means, hey, when we want to see ourselves, we have to support us.
Support the film, because you can also get the Hate You Give on
DVD, Blu-ray, all that good stuff.
VHS, still got a VHS, you can get it on iTunes, okay? It's on Fios, you can download it.
Because commerce drives content. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, gone are the bygone days of getting it from, homie from the Roscoe. You know what I'm saying? Get it for $2, $5, you know what I'm saying? It's shaky, people stand down in front, you know what I mean? We all been there, right? But we gotta, you know what I mean? But no, we work hard, right? You work hard. You want to be entertained. You want to see something that's representative of who you are and what your beliefs are, everything like that. And so, yes, you should take your hard-earned dollar and put it towards whatever movie you want to see in the movie theater, or whether you want to see it on VOD or want to see it on DVD, because that's what commerce drives content. When you come see it, that lets everybody know, the people at the studios know, that there is an audience for this. That the audience will come out and they'll pay their dollar and they'll come see it. And it's really that simple. And that's how we'll get more representations of who you are and what you want to see, is by supporting.
So that means if y'all like what y'all saw here today, you need to hit up iTunes. Okay, you need to come on now. You need to go ahead and type in the Hate You Give.
No, but the truth is, this is going to be a classic. Well, it is a classic already. You know what I mean? And I really believe that. And this is one of those ones you want to have in your library, like I got Boys in the Hood, like I got Menace. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Other films of that nature that you go back every once in a while and you go check. Well, I got to check on my DVD because I'm an analog brother, so that's what
I'm checking on iTunes. If you can get it on digital, DVD. Now I say VHS, but some people still have VHS.
Yes, we do.
You got that dual combo.
Yes, we do.
I don't know if the millennials or the Gen Zs have that.
Somebody's grandma got it.
But definitely Blu-ray, 4K. Y'all give it up for Russell. Okay. We're going to take a couple questions. We're going to start with some questions here from our LA audience, and then we will take some questions from our friends in Charlottesville and Brooklyn. So we're taking questions, not soliloquy. So if you have a question, raise your hand high. We have some microphones. We'll go right here first. And what's your name?
You want me to stand up?
Yeah, the people want to see you.
Well, hello, people. Y'all like that?
Show you right.
Come on now. Coming to you live from.
My name's Devon Edwards, and the question I have for you is: you said you had 2 sons, and in the film, it's two factors that I wanted to bring about. We talked about the snitching in the film, and it was like the last line where she said, "There's no more snitching." In your opinion, how do we continue the conversation in a consistent manner with our children, with your children, with those within our community, to stop the no snitch rule, because we still have a lot of unsolved murders and everything carrying on. And I say the consistency because we don't have this conversation until it's the next brother or sister that's murdered, by a police officer. So how do we keep this conversation consistent and not to take anything away from the film, but not to wait to the next film before we have another conversation, excuse me.
That's a good question, thank you.
Very good question. Wow. I mean, I think we have to create safe spaces, for everyone, for the community, for young people to speak out, and know that they are going to be protected. I mean, the reality of it is right and right don't wrong nobody.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So if the saying goes, when you see something, say something, and I think we have to abide by that and have the courage to do it. I don't. Other than that, I don't have a silver bullet. To be truthful, I don't. You know what I mean? And I know that there's reality in everybody's neighborhood, everybody's community that you have to contend with. That's just real. So what I'm saying may really not be realistic for others in their communities or their neighborhoods. You know what I mean? But all I can say from where I sit is you have to try to, as best you can, do what's right and say what's right, and go from there, and use a little bit of common sense.
Maybe be intentional about our conversation. So if you don't have to wait for the next film. Maybe folks in this room, as we talk about starting uncomfortable conversations, we have to have those uncomfortable conversations in our own communities. We'll take another question from right here. Yes, ma'am. Wait for the mic.
Hi, so,
What's your name?
Kimberly.
Stand up, Kimberly.
I just want to say my family's from East Bay, too. So, I went home over the summer, and I was eating at this pizza place on the other side of this wall, right after the overpass where the MacArthur BART station is.
Yes.
And my friend and I were sitting there, and we heard sirens for like 10 minutes. Then we walked home. There were like a few fire trucks, police cars at the BART station. And then the next day we found out Nia Wilson was murdered. So it really got me thinking about currently the case is at a standstill, suspended because of the murderer's mental health is being questioned. And I wanted to know what you thought about mental health, using that as a defense to kind of like think about what crimes people commit.
Kimberly got a deep question.
That's deep.
Kimberly, thank you for your question and for coming tonight. The press secretary in me is going to wordsmith this thing for you. So I think maybe even, there is something to be said about defense strategies that folks use. Now, I don't have a law degree. I just watch Law and Order like the rest of y'all. And I know some really fabulous attorneys. But I do think a bigger question is this idea of justice. And much like in the film, Khalil's family, it doesn't get justice. The community is left feeling like, and not even just a feeling, it's true, they're not met with justice. And so what is a community of folks to do? And I mean, I like how at the end of the movie, folks are like, we are rebuilt, like, Star's, Amanda's character says, Star, she's like, my father, Maverick, i.e. Russell's character, says that, immediately right after the fire, we're going to rebuild. But what are folks supposed to do with when our communities are repeatedly not met with justice? And you talk about the trauma of seeing this played on loop over and over and over again. It's traumatic and it wears on folks. And so I guess maybe a different question to play off that is, how can folks continue to have hope and continue to want to engage in the uncomfortable conversations when the system has repeatedly failed communities across the country.
Preach.
He said, I have nothing. He like,
And I mean, I guess my question for you is how did, you watch the news like everybody else? I would hope. No, I'm kidding. He watches the news. We discussed this upstairs. So how do you continue to have hope? I know some days you don't, but how do you personally continue to have hope when you see story after story?
I mean, for me personally, it's staying engaged as best I can. It's painful to watch the news, as I was saying, and it's painful to hear story after story about brother and sister being slain, shot down, arrested and whatnot. What I look to do is what I can do, in the community that I'm in, and help as best I can. Be an advocate for change, talking to young people, giving my time. I mean, and give each person that I engage with hope. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's like each, just having a connection with somebody, with students, working with young kids, with, acting and everything like that. That's how I can do it. It's just, that's my contribution.
That's your contribution.
And other people will do other things, and many hands make light work. And so, but I mean, no, I don't wake up every day feeling great. You know what I mean? I don't go to bed feeling that way either. But you just got to get up and just persevere and do whatever one can each day. Quite honestly.
I agree. I mean, I just want to remind folks that somebody else had to continue to get up and do the work, so we could be experiencing this moment right now.
True.
And we say it's everybody's doing their part. You're doing your part. You got the Cornel West, the Michael A. Dysons, the Angela Rye. I mean, like everybody's doing their part, and so we have to just also support these people too, as best we can. Whether people who are running for office, support them, and you have to be engaged what's going on civically, so that you can be prepared and so that you get out and vote and encourage others to do the same. And also keeping people informed as well, just keeping your friends informed. Like you said, having the hard conversations, bringing up issues that are going on, and people may not know, and then enlightening them and hitting them with an article about something. And so everybody's staying, abreast of what's happening in the community, what's happening in the country and in the world at large.
I know y'all want to turn off the TV. I know y'all want to unplug, but we can't. Because regardless, whether we engage or not, things are happening in our communities every single day. Whether you decide to turn on the news or not, something is happening. You were at the pizza shop. Okay? You get what I'm saying? And so I think people like to, for me, this movie is also about politics. And I know people like to say, I don't like to get engaged in politics. What people really mean is they don't like to be involved and engaged in partisan politics, I think, which is fair. But politics is about the ability to get justice in your community. Politics is about the ability to go to the grocery store and get green lettuce in your neighborhood. At Carter's grocery store.
That's right.
Brings it back to film. So politics is going on every single day in our communities, whether we decide to engage or not. So the only way to make it better is to engage. And your engagement can look different depending on where you are and what it is that you do. But we all have to be engaged and involved. We're going to take a question from our friends in Charlottesville and or Brooklyn. I know. We're coming back to you all. Chris, who do we have?
Hi, Symone. Okay, so this is a question from our remote locations. It's from Kayla Connells. And she asked,
Thank you, Kayla.
as a teacher, how can I encourage students of color to live as their full selves? No code switching expected.
Look, I mean, we talked about this for a little bit, but I think in general, yes. So people have literally fought, worked their asses off, died, sacrificed so much so that I could walk into a space and be my authentic self. So that so many folks across this country, in this room, and other rooms in Charlottesville and Brooklyn can be their authentic selves. But the fact of the matter is the systems, many of these systems are still in place. And so,
and it's not going to change overnight. Again, as I said, we have to be engaged and understand who we are. And again, code switching is it's a fact of life. It's just a part of our life. It's a part of our daily life. black, women, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. And so it's gonna be changed over time. We don't have to do it, it's not as bad as it used to be, and it'll get better tomorrow. But the thing is, I think, continuing to know to thine own self be true. Understand who you are, what you're doing, what you want out of life, what do you want when you're engaging with people, what you expect from other people when they're in your presence. There is no magic wand to say, how can we end it all tomorrow? It's not realistic. But again, it's just about continuing to be just engaged as a civic human being. And just continue to, just read about your history, read about your community, read about your culture, all those things, because that's what helps you continue to help you stand, walk tall and strong. When you know yourself, when you know where you come from, when you know your history, and that empowers you. And then people see that, they go, wow, that's a bad mother jumper right there.
I hope, Kayla, if you're listening, which I'm sure you are, I think one of the best things you can do on that note is let your students know that they deserve to be here. That they deserve to be here. They earn their right to exist in the world, to activate, to think, to be creative and innovative, just like everybody else. And I think that will, help minimize the code switches there.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Okay? I try not to look, y'all. I try not to have that work voice then. Some days I get it, and then somebody got to text me and be like, I heard the voice. I'm like, okay, y'all. Let's take another crowd question from here. Oh, all the questions. I'm going to go right here. Oh, yep, yes, ma'am. Nope, right back there. Yep. Stand up. There we go.
Hello.
Hi, what's your name?
My name is Shari Rodriguez.
Hi, Shari. What's your question?
I noticed particularly 3 relationships in the film that symbolize something significant to me. The first one being the uncle that was a cop. And it kind of destroyed the theory of blue versus black. And then the second one being the Caucasian boyfriend, which destroyed black versus white. And then the third one being the stepfather, I guess you would say, the drug dealer, who was kind of a cancer to the community. And he didn't win in the end, but all of those relationships were pretty much family members. Was that intentional in the writing?
Very much.
Good question.
Yeah, no, I think all 3 of those dynamics very much intentional. I think what Angie wanted to do, moreover, when you're talking about the 3 men, the 3 relationships, is that the trifecta of Maverick, Uncle Carlos, and King, and showing that we have 3 different dynamics of black men who live in the same community. And in a sense, in their own way, they all want the same thing. Do you know what I mean? Maverick wants to, help, protect his children, educate them, raise them right, be a help to his community. Uncle Carlos saying he wants to serve and protect his community, feeling that in his way, him being on the blue side of things, he can then, he can be of some service, right, to his community. Now, of course, it's checked and challenged, but that's what he thinks. And so, and then, King, being the pharmaceutical entrepreneur, is saying, like, listen, I can provide opportunity for those who don't have it. So you leave us here in this arid desert, in this community of Garden Heights. What do you expect us to do? So this is the opportunity that I have. And so in his mind, he's saying, hey, I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying to help some young folks in the community put some money in their pocket, help their family out. As Khalil said, like the money he helped with grandma, all of those things. So she wanted to show those 3 dynamics and how, what we're left with in our community. But there's 3 different types of black men, all sort of wanting the same thing and going about it a different way. And so we have to decide, they say, choose ye this day whom you will serve. Like, what side are you going to be on? And everything gets checked. And then again, at the end of who's left standing? What dynamic is left standing? And it looks like the man who chose to be a righteous member of his community and society is the one that's left with his family intact. And then Carlos has to think a little differently, about what he wants to do with his family and, how he's going to serve because he's been checked. And then King, is end up in jail, whatever, because now he's been checked. So, and then in that, the community society is going to see something different, hopefully, by who's left standing. So they see different images of black men. So then therefore, hopefully, that those children that are left, the Sakanis and whatnot, they're left with a different image. And so then they, in turn, make different choices because that third member is not there anymore. So that's the hope.
Shout out to Angie in this writing, the nuance. Yeah, we can clap for the nuance. We'll take another question. Oh my goodness. One right here. Yes, sir. Wait for the mic. And then we'll take another question from our friends online.
Yeah, this has to do with the context of the film and the process. Was there a scene in the film that was filmed but did not make it to the final cut of the version? And if so, what scene was it?
Oh, do you know what
And thank you for answering.
That's a great question.
Yeah, I think pretty much everything that was shot made it. I think what they did was they had to truncate the riot scene, and then, they cut down the scene between myself and Seven. And so when after we leave Carlos's house and she comes running out, there was like a whole moment where some of the gang members come up and I come with the gun and you can get it on Blu-ray, but and there was a whole thing.
On Blu-ray, ladies and gentlemen.
But George felt that the moment was really about his father and the son, and not about interference from the other gang members. It was about the moment of, rightly or wrongly, where the father takes his son into harm's way, and they have this moment, and that moment is really just about the father taking recognition of now realizing his son is a man because of what he chose to do, and that recognition now between two men, not a man and a boy, but two men now. And what goes on from there, he might say later to Lisa, he made a mistake. He might say, I was wrong to bring you in harm's way like that. But in that moment, there was a father and a son connecting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Chris.
So Russell, this is a question for you. It comes from Nellie Minton, and she asks, how do you personally handle microaggressions, such as when white people say things like, I don't see color?
Such as, I don't what? I don't Oh, I don't see color?
Yeah, I don't see color.
I tell them they don't see me, because the reality of it is that it's a false statement. You can't say you don't see color, and it's just wrong, because when you're looking at me, I'm a black man who represents ancestors who came Jamestown 1619, who represents slavery, who represents Jim Crow, segregation. That's what happened. That's what you see when you see me. That's what I represent. And so by saying you don't see color, when you see me, then you miss that. When you see Symone, you miss all of those things. And that's what people need to really take heed and understand. When we're looking at Asians, when we're looking at Hispanics, we're looking at their history, how they got to this country, what they had to endure to get here, and what they've had to endure to be here. You know what I mean? So I'm offended by it on a lot of levels when I hear that. If I don't have the time to say what I just said, I smile. And have to, move on and see about rectifying those ignorant statements in another way.
I usually give them a little. We'll take a question from the crowd right here. We'll go right here. Yes, ma'am.
Hello. So I'm a huge fan.
What's your name?
Hi, I'm Josie.
Hi,
I live in the
Josie.
Houston area. And this book was banned in the school district around us, and the movie wasn't even shown in a lot of theaters. So we can come out and support, but what do you do when we don't have those options? How can we make those options available to everyone?
That's, wow. I mean, again, that's about, being civically engaged, right? It's, getting a petition together for, school districicts, for the books, being at, city council meetings, I imagine, or school board meetings, about getting the books into the schools. It's, that's where the civic, engagement comes in, I would imagine.
It is. I mean, I talk about building coalitions. I talk about being radical revolutionaries in your own communities and your everyday spaces and places. And I think when people say radical revolutionaries, they think about the scene at the end of the movie when folks are running out when everybody's protesting. And I like to tell people, y'all not gonna catch me at the dying. You wanna know why? Because I'm gonna be on TV telling people why y'all dying in. Okay? If I'm at the dying getting arrested, who gonna tell folks why y'all dying in? My radical revolutionary act is explaining to the folks on television why the people are dying in. Okay? So perhaps your radical revolutionary act in your community is getting this on iTunes, Blu-ray, DVD. Oh, you have it. And so now you're going to host a screening in your community. But you got to build a coalition to host a screening because there's power in numbers. Okay? And so you need to build your coalition. And so a couple people get together and say, do you mind? I know you care because I care. I don't know if you mind. If we host a screening, I don't mind at all. Okay, well, do you know a couple other people that might not mind? And then you have a coalition of 15, 20, 30, maybe 40 people that want this content being introduced in their community that are interested. That, why was this banned? Also, are we still banning books in 2019? That's something I knew, okay? I learned something new training today. And so, you need to be y'all need to be some radical revolutionaries in your everyday spaces and places. And what I'm hearing is that I can't wait to hear about the screening that you're going to host in your community. And how you've encouraged other people to buy The Hate U Give on iTunes. All right, I think we have time for like 2 more questions. Oh, you pick, Russell, I can't.
Is there a heart in the house tonight?
Stand up!
You right there? Yes.
She's like, take my picture and give me the mic. She's like, you don't need to let me know to wait for the microphone. I've heard.
Hi, my name is Kristen. My question is about palatability. And so what advice do you have for people who want to be activists like myself, and are activists? But for me, as a woman of color, as a queer woman of color, I often find that I really want to be my most authentic self and like scream from the rooftops. But the reality of it is, at the end of the day, it's about survival and it's about being able to be in spaces, and that's not always conducive to being your most authentic self. So what advice do you guys have for balancing activism and strong activism with palatability and the and survival of yourself?
Wow, that's a good question. Sometimes my most authentic self wants to slap somebody across the face on television. But that doesn't allow me to come back to work, Russell. So, I gotta find a way to be authentic but still come back to work. Look, this idea about being palatable, and I want to know what you think about it. But basically, look, after I left the campaign and I worked at convention and everything, I was still doing television, but I wouldn't get paid. So I decided I was gonna go get maybe I can get a contract. They pay my bills. I was a millennial running around the country with no money. And I had agents tell me I wasn't palatable enough for cable television after I'd been on TV for a year. And so, and then the lady told me I needed voice lessons because I didn't sound like what people used to listen to when they turned on cable news. And I was like, damn. She told me I didn't sound like a white woman. That's who's on television. So, sometimes people won't pick you. Sometimes you will not ever be palatable enough for anybody else. So, I think we have to choose to activate and become comfortable with who we really are to be our authentic self. Because sometimes the proverbial they still won't pick you because you don't look like what they think the person is supposed to look like. You don't fit the mold of the idea of what that person is. And so I don't know if it's about being palatable. I think it's more so about figuring out how to be your authentic self in these everyday spaces and places.
Right. Well, the thing is, what you're saying is, being an activist, being your authentic self, being a woman who's queer and wants to stand out, that's a revolutionary act in its own right. You know what I mean? And so you can't expect people to respond in kind to a revolutionary act. People don't care for revolution, right? And so if you feel you have the courage to be an activist, to speak out, and to let everybody know what your sexuality is, that you're proud of it, you have to be willing to endure the slings and arrows that come with it. And then you have to, as you continue to fight with your allies and with other allies, you have to know that the season will change. But again, it may not change today. But the fact that you're willing to stand up, that you have to be willing to know that that's going to take time. You know what I mean? And so you have to make sure that your presence, your willingness, that revolutionary act, that people won't be palatable for a lot of people for a while. But in time, it will. And that's what we've been dealing with now over the last 10, 15, 20 years of people stepping out, speaking out, and at the time they did it, people didn't take it kindly. At the time they did it, people didn't care about it. At the time they did it, people were like, who are you? Who do you think you are? Can't stand you, don't like that, whatever. But then we said, no, we just changed our minds. So you just have to be aware of that. That's the reality of life. Like, people aren't going to embrace you for who you are right out. It's just all that takes time. But the fact that you have the courage to do it, you're saying, I'm willing to suffer the slings and arrows and take them. And that's what revolutionaries do.
They don't ask for permission. We can go on all night. But unfortunately, we won't be. Please give a warm round of applause for that. You're so good in this